Life.
From the Beacon Capital Management Weather Center.
Heat building in across the mid-state. I'm WSMV4 First Alert meteorologist Stefano DiPietro. Plenty of sunshine today, a little breezy this afternoon. High temperatures back near 90. Warm and humid overnight tonight. Low 70s for the overnight low. Tomorrow is a repeat day. Plenty of sunshine with highs back near 90.
6:38, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dan Mandis here on Nashville's Morning News, and Super Text line is open, 615-737-9986. I want to welcome onto the program Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor under the Trump administration and with the Heritage Foundation these days. Victoria, always great to have you on. And let's talk about what happened in Russia with Ukraine. Of course, I covered this extensively yesterday with this massive drone attack against Russia and taking out a lot of their air capabilities. So, number one, people are talking about how this is Russia's Pearl Harbor. Would you say that's an accurate description?
Good morning, Dan. Good to be with you. It's definitely a seismic event. I don't know that it's of the scale of Pearl Harbor in terms of loss of life, but certainly in terms of degrading a strategic capability and having a major power asleep at the switch. Those are definitely parallels. So what Ukraine did in this Operation Spiderweb is they deployed over the course of 18 months drones in special boxes that they got in shipping containers, I think, into various parts of Russia. And important for your listeners to know, this crossed 11 time zones. That's how big Russia is, and that's how big the area is that Ukraine was penetrating. And then when they were ready, they were able to activate these things essentially remotely. The boxes had special tops, and that the drones could get out, and then there was no protection for these bombers. And if it is accurate, this is tens of billions of dollars worth of damage, and a third of Russia's bombing fleet has been at least damaged, if not destroyed. And yes, these are nuclear bombers, but they're also the bombers that are shooting missiles into civilian areas in Ukraine. So you can see sort of the logic of the attack there. But it's definitely a very, very big event in this war.
One of the things that I find fascinating, and, Victoria, in these days of social media, a million different sources, you never really know exactly what the truth is. But one of the things that I'm hearing and that I've read is that the guys who drove these trucks with these drones inside of these containers actually had no idea what was in these containers, and they were, maybe I would describe them as independent contractors that were Russian, and they drove them close enough to the sites where the drones would then, I guess, explode out of the containers and make their way to their targets. Is that what you're hearing?
Well, basically, there is an artificial intelligence application here. So what the Ukrainians did is they trained the drones to recognize equipment that was on the ground in Ukraine, Russian equipment. So what the Russians thought was, there's just another drone coming over. I mean, there are a lot of them, obviously, now in modern day warfare. But what they were doing was training those drones to look for specific pieces of Russian equipment. So, yes, they could use these unwitting Russian contractors to move the drones around, because the drones already knew what they were to be looking at, or were looking for, rather. So, it's really remarkably clever. It is enabled by modern technology. This wouldn't have been possible 5 years ago. And so I think we are looking at modern warfare. If you remember Elon Musk a couple of weeks ago said, why are we paying billions upon billions of dollars for, manned aircraft, when in the future it's all going to be unmanned drones and aerial vehicles and whatnot. And that's what we're seeing playing out here in real time.
All right. So, number one, I'm going to ask about Vladimir Putin's response. But before I get to that, clearly this is a big setback for Russia. How long will it take them to recover from this?
Well, that's another big question nobody knows the answers for. Some of these planes were Cold War planes. They could be as much as 50 years old. that was not a capability that the Russians felt they needed to upgrade. And by the way, we have this problem too. At the Heritage Foundation, we just did a big frame report and a short documentary about the condition of our nuclear fleet and our nuclear weapons and how old they are. I mean, we haven't made a nuclear weapon in 35 years. So all of our stuff is aging out too. And so hopefully this can be a wake-up call for us that we need, smaller, more tactical weapons. We don't want to, have to respond to a small-scale attack, with an Armageddon-style nuclear weapon. So that's important for us to pay attention to as well, not have to go through yet another Pearl Harbor of our own. So it's not clear how long it'll take the Russians to recover from this, if they can.
All right, so this happened right before Russia and Ukraine. They were supposed to meet for some peace negotiations, but I guess part of my question is, okay, so who is now winning this war? That's going to be one question that I think a lot of people are asking. Does this now mean that Ukraine is winning this war?
It certainly means Ukraine is in a better position than they were five days ago, because Russia was really pushing the narrative that they were winning, their gains were inevitable. This is a war of attrition. They win just because they have more people to throw at it, which is true. But at this point, Ukraine has demonstrated that they have some capabilities that the Russians didn't know about. This isn't anything that particularly blows back on the United States. It's not like, these were made in the USA drones, that came in. So the Russians will blame us for it because that's what they do. But at the same time, it's not an attack that will immediately implicate the United States or NATO. So there's a certain elegance to that as well. And the question is, how will Putin respond? Yes, he did bomb Ukraine heavily after this happened, but not really anything that out of the ordinary for what he's been doing anyway. And, the question then becomes, does he now realize Ukraine had a capability he didn't know about, they can't defend against? Is he better off engaging in the talks? And important to point out that the talks in Istanbul did go forward yesterday.
Yes.
The Russians didn't cancel them, which they could have done. They went. So maybe this is a move towards getting the Russians to the table and giving Ukraine a little bit more leverage to get a decent deal.
Victoria Coates joins us from the Heritage Foundation, former Deputy National Security Advisor under Donald Trump. Victoria, coming up, you did mention that Russia will blame the United States. There's some people that are saying that there's no way that Ukraine pulled this off themselves. They did have some outside help, regardless of what Vladimir Zelensky says. I'll get your opinion on that straight ahead. Give me 30 seconds to check the roads on WTN.
Jilton, 24 eastbound, an accident past New Hope Road blocks the median. Ashland City, Old Clarksville Pike closed to Carl Perry Road due to a vehicle fire. Riverfront, watch for road closures for CMA Fest, including First Avenue between Broadway and Demonbreun. I'm Christy O'Brien.
As far as your weather today, a high of 90 and partly cloudy. All right, Victoria Coates with the Heritage Foundation. So do you think that either the United States or some country or some organization, maybe NATO, Europe, whatever, but helped Ukraine in this endeavor, this attack on Russia?
Well, I mean, we could all say yes. I mean, obviously, Ukraine has been the recipient of a massive amount of aid and assistance throughout the course of this now, 40-month war. So yes, obviously they could not have done this and if they had not been provided that assistance. How direct the participation is, I don't know. I mean, Ukraine is a sophisticated country. They have a significant military. They obviously are highly incentivized to come up with some new ingenious plan that offsets the Russian advantage in numbers. And this was part of essentially Cold War doctrine for the United States and NATO, was that Russia was always going to have the sort of the dominance in terms of sheer numbers of people. And so the United States and NATO had to have dominance in technology. So that, I think, is the lesson that the Ukrainians took on board, who did what to assist them. Hopefully we will never know because we shouldn't know.
Right.
But I think you can say with all certainty that yes, the assistance of NATO and particularly the United States is what has sustained Ukraine throughout the war.
I've noticed that Donald Trump, he wavers back and forth. It seems to me like Trump has been trying to deal with, obviously, Putin and Zelensky. And at times he's been critical of Zelensky. Obviously, we all know about that ill-fated White House meeting. But as of late, the president has been very critical of Vladimir Putin. And so I've noticed that President Trump is just trying to end this one way or another. And I think part of this conversation has to be, does this drone attack, does this lead us closer to a possible lasting peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia?
Well, I think that's definitely the hope. And I know the president is very frustrated because during his first term, he was able to leverage the relationship that he had with Vladimir Putin on business matters to keep him more or less in his box. He didn't attack anybody during Trump's first term, and that was unique. He attacked during George W. Bush. He attacked during Obama. And then after President Trump left, he attacked, obviously, spectacularly under President Biden. And so, President Trump sees a situation that he had more or less under control, that President Biden had really squandered that peace, created this grinding war. And, I think he was hopeful that he could, re-leverage that relationship, get to a quick peace deal. That turned out not to be the case. I think there's a big China element in this, because one of the other things that's happened since President Trump was in office was the partnership without limits between President Xi and President Putin, a new kind of conglomerate, international conglomerate. So in a way, you have China calling the shots here. Maybe they want Putin to continue this war, and he doesn't have a lot of choice in the matter. So I think the president is frustrated about that. I think he in his mind, it would make a great deal of sense for both parties to get to the table, end this horrible war, end the killing, as he says, and move on. But that doesn't seem to be happening. So I think he is, sort of reconsidering what his assumptions were coming into office, that things have changed. And, if the Ukrainians can start to show some successes like this, I do think this is an incentive then for Russia to be more accommodating, to make some more concessions of their own, to get to a deal that the Ukrainians will agree to.
How worried is the defense and security apparatus here in America that we might get hit with this kind of an attack from somewhere? We just had a terrorist attack in Boulder, Colorado, for example. But is the United States prepared for this kind of an attack?
Well, that again, it should be a wake-up call for us. It's why the president has been talking about the Golden Dome, that yes, would defend against intercontinental ballistic missiles potentially armed with a nuclear warhead. But as he said, this is for the whole country. Then this is going to be for projectiles big and small. It's modeled on the Israeli system, which has 3 layers. Iron Dome, which most people know about, that's for the little things like the drones, the missiles, the more sort of rocket type things. You've got David Sling for medium range, and then Arrow 2 and 3 for the long range, the intercontinental ballistic missiles. So that's what we need. We need all of those layers, because, you could have the cartels, for example, come up with some kind of scheme like this with a swarm of drones to attack, a prison or something to get some folks out. So you can imagine all sorts of scenarios where you need defenses for this. And the Russians have shown how painfully naked they were for this attack and unable to do anything about it. And so I think we need to be working very closely with partners and allies. Our partnership with Israel on missile defense goes back to the 1980s. That is a Reagan-era initiative. So we have a tremendous familiarity with them, their systems. Some of our systems are joint. And we've got to figure out how, going from a country the size of New Jersey, like Israel, how we're going to then translate that into a country the scale of the United States. The good news is that it's doable. More good news is President Trump is talking about it and putting money behind it. But there's a lot of work to be done.
All right. As always, great analysis. Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor with the Trump administration, now at the Heritage Foundation. Victoria, have a great rest of day, and we'll have you on again soon. It is 6:52 on Nashville's Morning News. Jay Harper is in for Joan Jones and has the news at 7. And what's up, Jay?
Yeah, Dan, debate in the Senate of the budget and tax bill before them. A drug bust in Sumner County that started off as a traffic stop, and we'll have this morning's money news. That's coming up at 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
The Matt Murphy Show.
Right now, we're in the beginning stages. We've gotten the border, relatively speaking, secure, thanks to the Trump administration. And now we're finding those elements amongst illegal aliens, individuals that are criminal lawbreakers beyond their illegal status. That's what we're dealing with, in my opinion, right now.
The Matt Murphy Show, today from 3 to 7 p.m.
And streaming on the Super Talk 99.7 WTN app.
6:53, Nashville's Morning News. Business owners, listen, if your concrete floors need a little love, my friends at Specialty Coatings can help you today. Now, they specialize in concrete floor coatings and polished concrete, and they've been